Hello, and welcome to the Perfect Franchise Podcast.
I'm Kris, and joining me is my wonderful co-host, Andrea.
In this podcast, we're on a mission to help you discover all that franchising has to offer.
We'll explore expert strategies, interview successful franchise owners, and give you the tools to make informed decisions.
So whether you're considering your options or you're ready to take that plunge, we're here to support you every step of the way.
So let's jump into today's episode.
Hi, welcome to another episode of the TPF podcast. Today, Andrea and I have Ryan Parsons as a guest. Ryan's CEO of Evive Brands. Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great. We love having someone on that has multiple brands on them. So a little hint to the listeners. That's what we're talking a lot about today. And so, Ryan, start us out a little bit. How did Evive Brands come to be? What's the origin story there? And then how did you turn into a multi-concept franchisor?
Yeah. Oh, love to. So Evive Brands, they formed that a few years ago before I was even with the company. So what private equity does is they go raise some capital and then they have a concept. They want to start a platform and they'll get a bunch of money together, investors, and then they'll start building out a platform of brands that are similar enough so that, maybe somebody can own two of them someday. They can cross brand. They can have shared services. So this concept started out with really focusing on senior services. So the first three brands, strictly service seniors that are in the home, need services in the home or when they're ready to move out of their home. And then a couple years ago, they decided they wanted to expand the portfolio towards even more services for homeowners. So kind of any homeowner services, we want to continue to build this platform up. And now it has the Brothers That Just Do Gutters was added to the platform in late 2023. So got 4 brands total.
So Ryan, let's even go further back because everybody, I think, that's contemplating business ownership, they like to hear stories of folks that started from absolute zero, built something, right? That's always the part of the story we like. So we talked about the senior care centric part of Evive, but that's not your background, right? You got into franchising a different way. So talk to listeners about that.
So I'll try and give you the shortest version possible. But my brother in 1999 decided to quit his job in teaching and start a gutter company. No help, no mentor. He was working for a gutter guy in the summer and said, I think I can do this, and opened up his own company. A couple years later, I found myself in between a .com, .bomb. I had a graphic design background, and I'm working on a truck weekends with my brother, and eventually 2 knuckleheads are on a gutter truck slinging up gutter. And this was not fancy. There was no core values, mission statement. We were just happy to get done with work to go fishing. So really, it did not start out with any big vision other than brothers just trying to, it was kind of like glorified chores, like, when we were kids, we were still. And so we start building up this business and we're having some success. And I'm finding like, I love business. I love building systems. I loved reading all these books like the E-Myth and figuring out how to systematize something that other people can't figure out and grow and expand it. And so we just kept going and kept growing it. And eventually we had the idea to franchise it. We thought that would be really cool to teach other people how to do this model. And it wasn't without our bumps and bruises. I'll tell you, I mean, if we knew how to read a P&L back in the day when we started, we would have went out of business. We didn't know what we didn't know. But we were too stubborn to quit anything. And we just kept going and we kept building it. Once the idea of franchising was born, I realized I'm like the integrator one who does all the heavy lifting. My brother, not all the heavy lifting, but like figuring out the systems. My brother's like the visionary. Hey, we should franchise this. I'm like, all right. And then I've got to go figure out how to do all that. And we realized there was a lot of work to be done. Franchising a business, you can franchise anything. Like we could franchise this podcast tomorrow. It doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean it's ready. It just means that you can. And when we realized what it means to be a franchise and what we had to have buttoned up as far as technology, branding, systems, how to hire people, how to keep them engaged, we had a long way to go. We weren't ready. And so that was around 2007. The idea was born. It wasn't until 2014 that we actually franchised it at the end of the year. 2015 had our first franchisee. And then we just continued to grow it fairly organically. And then we hit a stride. We in 2021, we sold like 85, we had added 85 new franchisees within like 9 or 10 months. Like we were the coolest kid in franchising for probably a year and a half to 2 years. Sold like crazy, grew the system. And in 2023, we had over 100 franchisees. I mean, we got further than my brother and I ever thought. We thought our kids would have to get this far. And it was a time for us to go, you know what? We've gotten it as far as we can. We can continue to go further, but we need help. This next level in a franchise. So we started looking for partners, and we found Riverside, and we ended up selling the business to Riverside. And me, I always wanted to be part of a platform. Like when we decided that we thought selling might be an option, I'm like, you know what? I'm not interested in any PE that's not in a platform. I love it for my franchisees. I love it for shared services. There's just so much about being part of a platform that seemed beneficial to me personally and to the franchisees and the employees of the brand. So that's what we did. And I was really cool. I got offered the position of CEO of the platform. You know, as I'm exiting Brothers, I got to be the CEO of the platform. So I'm still working with Brothers every day, working with 3 other brands, Executive Home Care, Grayson's, and Assisted Living Locators. And it's been awesome.
That's great. I love that. Well, we had you guys out and your face is on the side of the truck still, you and your brother.
That's
So,
true.
cartoon character. So you were out at our house at one point.
No
So
way. That's awesome.
that's great. Yeah. No, I think that's great, Ryan. Thanks for giving us that background. To Chris's point, I think it's so great to hear about building an individual brand, and then you build it up to this company, and then it becomes sort of this family of brands. So you mentioned sort of in the home service space. So senior care is definitely home service. Brothers That Do Gutters is home service. How are you thinking about expanding, and what are you looking for when you bring additional brands and concepts into the portfolio?
So, I mean, we're definitely looking to expand in those areas. We have a lot of potential acquisitions right now, more in the home services. Some are like in the home service, some are outside the home. So all good fits. And what we're looking for is like a solid system, great leadership, white space in the sense of they're not sold out. There's, like there's no more territory left. So there's some upside. And then with what we think we can do, whether it's add more franchisees, improve their tech or marketing, or, how do we help their franchisees achieve more? So that's kind of what we're looking for. It's got to make sense for everybody. So I wish we could just go out and pick all the categories we want. But it just, who raises their hand, who's a good fit, and that's kind of how we decide.
Yeah.
That's great.
One of the things you've touched on, Ryan, and I want to go deep with this, is that so you have 4 brands, and you've, and I don't remember what term, sharing, these kind of economies of scale benefits, that if I'm somebody that buys a new Brothers Who Do Gutters franchise, right, or I buy a new Assisted Living Locators franchise, there's some benefits to me, because behind the scenes, there's this machine that's not just supporting my franchise, but supporting all 4 franchises. Can you go into that and, go as deep as you want? Because I think that's huge. And Andrea and I, and every consultant here at TPF, we talk about that a lot, when you can get with what you call a platform, right?
Yeah,
There's some big
absolutely.
advantages there.
So one of the immediate ones is marketing, right? So when you've got a family of 4 brands, you got to imagine they're all different sizes, right? They're not like all $100 million companies. But when you centralize services, some of these smaller brands, they just gained access to so much more knowledge than their brand fund could afford, right? So when you think, if you're buying a franchise and they charge 1% or 2% marketing or national marketing, if it's only doing a few $1,000,000, that 2% doesn't really go very far. We're not doing Super Bowl ads. We're not coming up with, but when you have a platform, those smaller brands have access to a lot more. You have a better vendor, like I remember when we were small and I'm trying to make vendor negotiations, they're like, dude, you got 3 locations, don't care, but now you start talking to vendors when it's marketing, it's a platform, it's SEO, SEM, pay-per-click, any of this stuff, mailers, they're throwing themselves at you because they see that you're part of a platform. All right, I got one brand so far, but man, if we got the other three. So they're very competitive. I feel like they work harder for us because we've exited vendors in the marketing sector. We vetted them. They looked really good. After everyone's good for 3 to 6 months, and then they kind of set it and forget it. And we've been able to keep people honest a lot longer and them working hard for us. So the marketing is huge, especially now that we've got our vendor stack really dialed in. What we're doing in SEO, I don't think anyone can touch it. I mean, that would probably be, a reason for somebody. When you're small, you don't have access to all that stuff. You're still figuring things out.
Yeah. I remember in a previous stage of my franchising career, I worked with another multi-concept franchisor. And when you saw what the marketing department was doing, like when you really got to see it behind the scenes, I remember the first time I went to a big demonstration, I walked away feeling very conflicted in that, because this was years ago, but I felt like in one sense, it was so exciting. It was so amazing what they could do for their franchisees. On the other hand, I was like, yeah, there's almost some sadness there. I was like, the days of the guy owning a gutter business, Joe's gutter business, and at night he figures out Google AdWords and kind of becomes a little masterful at that. Those days are over. When they're competing, Joe's Gutters is competing against these multi-franchisor concepts and the platforms. You just
It
can't
is.
do
It
it.
really.
You
It
can't
is.
do it anymore.
It is sad. I mean, that's how I learned. And that's why it took us 20 years to become an overnight success. Is because we didn't have the money to go hire anybody good. I had to learn SEO and AdWords. I built the website. I did all that kind of stuff. But yeah, there is seeming like you're either really small or really big. It's hard to be in the middle anymore. It's to be like a 1 or 2 or 3 truck company. It's very hard, but yeah, I mean, that's the nature of it. But on the flip side too, these services are, I mean, there's guys now that don't know anything about marketing that are able to use Jobber, and they have access to CRMs now that out of the box are better than things we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on years ago trying to build. So the flip side is, I think everybody, I mean, think about it. Everyone has access to AI now. It's not just the big companies. And I'll actually make an argument. It's slightly harder. This will, maybe counterintuitive to what we're talking about. It's harder for somebody who's bigger to pivot with the technology. When I was one gutter company or one, assisted living, and I wanted to change a CRM, that's it. You just change it. Now when you got to convert 50, 100 people over, so you're a little bit more nimble when you're small. And a small franchisor, that's a nice advantage sometimes too. As they're working things out, they get to be a little bit more nimble in what they're doing.
Yeah, agreed.
And that might be part of it too, is, just like you figured out some of that where somebody else has to go out and pay to do that. That's what we always say all the time. That's what you're getting with a franchise. So you
Correct.
figured out some of it. Now you're under this larger umbrella that can really sort of put that next layer on and make it take off.
Yeah.
And that's really where you kind of bring that in.
Oh, for sure. I mean, building our first company, 3 names, 10, 15 different logos, the amount of marketing companies, the different wraps on our trucks. I mean, we did not nail anything right the first time.
Yeah. Yep. It's trial and error. So Ryan, pivot a little and talk about the franchisees. So you have 4 different concepts. Some of them are a little bit more similar at the moment, but what are you looking for? And is that different across the brands? Is there a different fit of the type of franchisee that you need coming in?
I mean, franchisees are, we're always looking for the same franchisee. Insert, doesn't matter with the brand. These are like, we call it the 3 H's, people that are hungry, honeable, and honorable, right? What's the other one from the Ideal Team Player? Shoot, I can't remember. It's another book, Hungry, Humble, and
Kris,
Smart.
you read? What is it?
Hungry, Humble.
I don't know. I didn't read that one.
Yeah, hungry, humble, and smart, right? So we need people that, they're leaders. They've got grit, that they can, that they've got vision. We need people that are committed. A lot of things that we say is, if you treat your business like a hobby, it'll pay you like a hobby, right? And a lot of people are looking for this unicorn of semi-passive or absentee. I've seen it work for people that have a lot of money and they can afford to hire a killer staff. And I've seen it where it doesn't work because you got to build your business. You got to know it. You got to have some skin in the game. So franchisees, like, they're, again, across each brand, with the senior care side, it's a passion play. When I think of executive home care, assisted living locators, and even Grayson's, these are people that primarily have had a really bad experience. They put their parent in a home, lost them 2 weeks later, and they want to make a difference. And then there's some franchisees that are just looking to quit their corporate job and make a legacy, and they're not really caring as much of like, no one wakes up and wants to do gutters or roofing or some of the things that are out there. But franchising is a vehicle for you to achieve your dream, right? So if you're looking for something to build for your kids or make an impact in the community or just something that you can call your own, it's a lot of the same type of person I've noticed.
Yeah. Ryan, let's pivot for a second. Let's talk about operations, because before the podcast, we were talking about support, about onboarding. I'll speak for myself. I'm always surprised where once in a while I'll have a client who asks me questions about, hey, does the franchise help me do this? Do they help me do that? And sometimes I forget that it's not all universally understood that, like, yeah, they hold your hand through every aspect.
And they
of this
should.
front. Yeah.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk a little bit about just across the brands, what Evive does? If I'm a new franchisee, brand new, I go to training.
Mm-hmm.
Are you done with me?
Yeah, that's it. Go figure it out. No, don't use that soundbite. Yeah, that's huge. And for us, so what's really cool is all 4 brands had an onboarding process, right? But they weren't all the same and they weren't as predictable. So what we did is we actually, through using Monday.com, it's a project management software, all of the brands, we have the same onboarding process, right? So you're going to get somebody that's holding your hand. You're going to get weekly touch bases on Zoom. Everything that you need to do is actually it's written in there for you. There's nothing you have to remember. People are like, oh, what size office do I need? Oh, I'm like, you don't have to write anything down. It's all in here. What I need to do as a franchisor, what you need to do as a franchisee. So setting them up in their portal, getting their email address, getting their credit card so we can start running Google AdWords eventually. All of that is done systematically. And it's a lot. I can't tell you that, it's nice because it's all organized, but it takes a lot of time. If you want to launch well, you've got to do everything on there, right? And what's really neat is, so onboarding, call it anywhere between 60 and 90 days, depending on the brand. And then you come to training. And then, what's been so cool about onboarding is we realized in COVID, half the stuff people flew in to get trained on, we could have done over Zoom. I don't need someone to fly across the country to show them a PowerPoint on marketing. So we were able to do so much more now before they come to training. And training, in my opinion, if you're coming to an office or you're coming for training, I only want to do what only I can do in person. So is that visiting an estate sale? Is that walking a facility? Is that hanging a gutter, right? That's what you're here for, is something I can't, there's a saying, can't learn how to ride a bike in a seminar, right? So, and then after that, it's the implementation phase. So there's 3 phases. You've got onboarding, training, and implementation. And that's where weekly, it's basically a reminder. Okay, so you're going to process your first payroll. Let's do that together. Okay, it's time. Okay, you've got your first estimate or your first placement or your first sale. And so we put them through all that. And depending on the brand, they all do it slightly different, as where their franchise business coach takes over. Some brands, they might do the onboarding, the training, and the follow through. Other brands, you might have a couple different people in that scenario, but then it goes to ongoing. right? Now you're 90 days launched, 3 months, 6 months launched. Now you're on a regular cadence of coaching calls, budget versus actual, best practices, peer groups you're part of. So yeah, it never ends. It slows down as far as it gets into a cadence of like, all right, now you're on a monthly or bi-monthly, but lots and lots of support, and it should be in any kind of system. But I would say your first 6 months, it should be really, really hands-on, and then it starts to go to you know what you're doing, and you don't need as much support.
So, Ryan, one last question sort of about sort of being part of this larger family of brands, this multi-concept. So, what you hit on this a little bit, and I don't think we've ever talked about this in the podcast, is bringing in brands where people can stack them. So, talk a little bit about how to think about that. Not everybody comes in with that concept, but some people want to have a much larger business opportunity. So, tell us a little bit about that.
So that was the number one reason, top three reasons that I wanted to be part of a platform. Nothing to me, when a franchisee buys a territory and let's just say they can afford one and they're a great franchisee, and then they get surrounded. I hate that idea. I hate that idea that they can hit a certain revenue amount, and then, in the beginning, you're growing crazy, right? You're going from whatever. And then you might hit a point where it's like, all right, I hit $1 million. Next year, maybe 1.1, then maybe 1.15. Like, I hate that. So if they can't buy more territory, how cool. They understand business. And if you're part of a platform, hopefully they're similar enough that you're like, man, I'm already doing I'm doing placements, in home, I'm doing in-home care, and I've got people that no longer can use our services because they need to go into a home. My gosh, why wouldn't I buy assisted living locators? Now I can help them on both sides, right? And so if you're not able to grow, or you've grown as much as you can, I love the idea that now you could be a multi-brand owner. You've got two businesses that really feed each other, and shoot, you can end up with three businesses. If you've got staff and it's somewhat seasonal, how cool that you can now use that staff, during the slow season to do something complementary. So I love that. It kind of continues to raise the ceiling for franchisees, that they're not like, crap, I love this business. I wish I could buy more territory, but there's none left.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's great.
First of all, hey, Andrea, I have read the book. You can't learn to ride a bike at a seminar.
Yes, I have too.
Mark that down.
Yeah, check.
So let's switch it up now. We're going to jump into our rapid fire questions. And so these two questions are not specifically about Evive Brands or any brand specifically. This is just us trying to glean some of your franchise wisdom after all these years in various aspects of franchising. So the first question is, if you were talking to somebody who's seriously contemplating jumping into franchising for the very first time, regardless of brand, what's one piece of advice you'd give them, Ryan?
I'm going to tell them, take a long, hard look in the mirror and understand if business ownership is for you. You can buy the best brand in the world with the best reviews and the most successful franchisees, but at the end of the day, it comes down to you. And if you've ever read an FDD, you can see there's people at the bottom, there's people that terminated and weren't successful, and there's people that are killing it. And most of the time, it comes down to them as a leader, as somebody who's committed to growing. And I would say you have to invest in yourself. You're a self-led education. You should be listening to podcasts, and if you're already listening to this, you're ahead of the game. You're doing your homework. But the books that you read, the coaching that you get, it really, everyone wants to buy a business in a box, but not everybody can run it. You got to really look at yourself.
Yeah, great advice.
Yeah.
So now that same person, they made the leap. They're in their first year of business ownership, which we know is not all roses and sunshine. So they're white knuckling it. They're hanging on for dear life. What's one piece of advice you'd give that person?
Never talk to someone who's in the same spot as you. Only talk to people that have made it through where you are.
Excellent.
That's a huge mistake. You're oh man, it's so hard to hire. I keep losing employees. Don't talk to the person that you launched with that might have the same issue. Talk to somebody who a year ago that was their issue, or 2 years or whatever, and find out what they did. You always want to have a mentor that is where you want to be.
I'm going to write that one down, Ryan.
I
That's
know.
a good
I
one.
love that one because even part of the validation, Ryan, we always say to people, don't talk to the people that are in the bottom. You're not going to be there. If you buy this business, you don't want to be in the bottom. You got to figure out, are you like the people that are in the top?
Correct.
That's really where you want to, it's the same thing. But I think that's really great because you don't want that negativity. If somebody else is in that same position, it's going to stir the negativity. What you want is, where do I need to get to and how do I get there?
Yep.
That's great. Thank you so much. Great advice. So thanks so much for being on today. I really like having sort of these multifamily concepts in, and so people can see what are all these different ways that you can think about a brand and what's the platform offering me? What are they offering at the, the corporate level that's going to support me? How do I think about growing and scaling the business potentially a little bit differently than just staying in the same one? If I'm maxed out, how do I add on? And I think that's really great. So thank you so much for coming on and telling us about sort of your brand family today. We appreciate that.
Thank you
So
for
if
the
you're
opportunity.
thinking, yeah, that's great. So if you're thinking about franchising, remember that while there's no one size fits all, the perfect franchise for you is definitely out there. To explore your options, please visit theperfectfranchise.com by clicking on Let's Talk, schedule a call with one of the consultants on the Perfect Franchise team. We look forward to connecting with you again on our next episode.